All right, everyone, this is the moment you've been waiting for. This is a true campfire story. Let me show you my fire. That is my campfire. Now, I told you I was going to tell you a ghost story tonight, but it's actually more like a demon story. And this is a true story. It did happen to me. Quite a few years ago, my children were in middle school, which they are adults with families of their own, so that tells you how long ago this was. But the experience is still very, very real for all of us, actually. We were building a new home, and we needed a place to live for about 6 months to a year until that house was built. I was very briefly married. It was a strange situation from the very beginning. I should have listened to my gut. I did not, and I learned my lesson. It was a very short-lived relationship. However, he had a son, and I had my 2 children, and I went into this thinking that we were going to blend families and be the Brady Bunch, and it would not happen, and it could never have happened because there were some psychological issues there that prevented him from being a good father and really a good husband. This was kind of like our first place together, and I thought we can adjust. You know, we've got plenty of room for all of us to adjust to each other and not feel cramped and on top of each other. It was a dark house. It was dark, like a Mediterranean, dark brown cabinets, dark brown wood, had the Mediterranean wrought iron ceiling fixtures, carved doors. It had a stairway that went up. One side went one way, one side went another way, and then there was a stairway that came up from the kitchen, from the back side. We moved in, and the kids all picked their rooms. My stepson was on the second floor. We were on the second floor, and my son was on the second floor, and then my daughter was downstairs, and she had a room all to herself because she was a teenager. You know, teenage girls I was there, and I'm sure if you're female, you've been there too, and if you have a daughter that's a teenager, you understand. The washer and dryer was down in the basement, and so it was a basement and 2 stories, big house, and the basement was mostly unfinished, but there was a laundry room down there, and it was like the stairs in every horror movie you've ever seen, where the single light bulb over the stairs, and then you walk down and it's very dark. Yeah, that's what it was like. So the kids found this little room. It was only about 4 foot tall. They found handwritten notes by a child, and it said, get out now, don't live here. I looked at these notes, and I just told them, hey, you know, somebody was just pranking the new tenants, so don't worry about it. There's nothing wrong with this house. What there was. It did not take very long for me to realize there was something bad about this house. There was just a really dark energy. It was very overpowering. There was times you felt somebody was looking at you, and there was nobody around. And the longer we lived there, the worse it got. My stepson had anger issues, and he became just almost violent. I just did not feel good about it. I didn't understand what was going on, but things were just getting worse and worse and worse. I would go home for lunch, and when I walked in, I felt just scared. And I didn't want to tell the kids this, because we have to live here for a year while our other house is being built. There was a raised area off of the kitchen, and it was right by patio doors. I would walk in, and if I had to go to the bathroom, I would wait till I got back to work. I would not go upstairs. I was terrified to go upstairs by myself. My daughter started hearing things in the ceiling, scratchings, and she was seeing things and shadow people, and she was scared. And then my son started hearing things and seeing things. And there was this one room that I wanted to turn into a guest room. It was right off the garage. There was like this hallway that went down to the garage. And then there was this room. And I thought, oh, what a great, guest room for people when they come to visit. That room was always so cold that you couldn't sleep in there. You could see your breath. It never warmed up. One night, my daughter had a girlfriend over, and her friend were watching something on television, and they turned it off, and they had their stepbrother down there because, they were all freaked out. They knew that there was something wrong with this house, that it was haunted. They had turned off the television, and the three of them were sitting there talking, and all of a sudden the television just came back on, and they took the remote and turned it off again. It was not set on a timer. There was no reason for that television, and it kept doing that. Every time they turned it off, it would come back on. They started seeing faces in this craggy rock of the fireplace, and I was just blowing it off. It's like, oh, come on, you guys, it's just shadows. Well, I went in there and was sitting one evening, and I saw faces in those rocks, and they were moving, and they were looking at me, and it was a most god-awful scary thing. But the scariest thing was I went down to do laundry in the basement. I started the laundry, and all of a sudden I just was overcome by this feeling that something was coming for me. I walked quickly across the dark part of the basement and started up the stairs. And I could feel hot breath on my neck. And it was like a growl, a roar. I don't know how to describe the sound. It was not like a human sound, though. And I turned around, and I saw this face. It was a demon face, and there was flames around it. I was literally crawling up the last few steps, and I reached the doorknob, and it wouldn't open. It was like the door was locked. And I'm sitting here screaming and crying, open the door, open the door, open the door. Well, my son comes by, and he opens the door, and he says, Mom, what's wrong? And I said, why did you lock the door? And I'm just like in tears, and I couldn't even stand up. I literally crawled into the hallway and shut the door behind me. My daughter had come at that point, and they're saying, Mom, the door was not locked. But when I turned that handle and I pushed against it, it would not open. And that face was right behind me, breathing on me. It was a horrible house. None of us really wanted to talk about it until we got into our new house. And then little bits and pieces started coming out. And everybody, every single one of us had experiences. We were scared, and we could not wait to get out of there. Like I said, my stepson had some anger issues. He just was a scary person then. And when we moved out, he became just a normal teenage boy. That house is still standing today. I remember like 4 or 5 years ago, the kids and I were talking about it, and we looked it up, and it was still a rental, and it had been changing tenants almost like every year. I do believe it has sold. I hope that they have exorcised whatever was there. If you have ever had an experience like that, if you've lived in a place that you thought was just pure evil, leave me a comment, because you're not alone. It happens. I'll tell you one other quick one. My daughter had a special needs child, and I needed to have a job that I could adjust my hours on, because he almost died 3 times the first year. And then she had an older son that, we were trying to help take care of. Cleaning houses was actually the perfect solution, because I could rearrange my schedule, and I made good money. So I went out to clean this one house. It was vacant. It was actually a foreclosure. And it was 2-story, and it had an elevator. The guy that was handling all this told me, he says, we've had workmen out there, and they say they won't go back in because it's haunted. I drive up, and this house is like a 2-story house, and Apparently there was a woman there that was an invalid, and she had this elevator that she used because she couldn't climb the stairs. She had allowed some people who were heavy into drugs and other things to come in, and she needed the help, and they were going to take care of her. But they also may have conjured up some pretty evil energies while they were there. So I walk in, and it just took my breath away. And so I thought, okay, I have to go look around the house. And I remember I was going through every room. I definitely felt it in the kitchen. And then I came back, and it was one of those almost like an antebellum staircase. You know, it goes up and curls around. And I looked up, and there's a shadow person walking right across the landing up there. And that gave me the heebie-jeebies. It's like, okay, well, I have to clean this house. And I kept feeling something dark following me around. And I started to go to the elevator, and I could not go in. And so I just did the stairs. And I told the guy that hired me, I said, I didn't clean the elevator. I didn't wipe it down. I will not go into that elevator. You can get somebody else to do it. I cleaned the rest of the house. But what I did is I went upstairs, and I kept seeing this shadow person following me around. Every time I turn around, there'd be that dark shadow. And finally I said, look, I know you're here, and I know you don't want me here. I can feel it, and I am so sorry. But this is my job, and I have to do this, and I need the money. And I promise you, I'm going to be as quick as I can, and then I'm going to leave. So can we just have a truce? If you will just not bother me, I promise you I will be in and out of here as quick as I can. I just need to run the sweeper and wipe everything down and clean it up, and I'll be done. That seemed to appease it. I didn't see that shadow figure anymore after that. I could feel it, but I didn't see him. I went downstairs. I had the kitchen left to do. My motion light just came on. I'm not sure why. I had a bear here last night, so I'm a little nervous. Anyway, I went to the kitchen to clean it. And boy, howdy, there was a different energy there. It was not the same as the shadow person upstairs. This was a really different energy, and it was awful. And I tried to say the same thing, but it did not want to leave me alone. And so I really didn't do the greatest job mopping that tile floor, but, you know, I did it as quick as I could and got out of there. And then apparently several of the work people, there had been a pool in the back, beautiful gardens, and there was some really bad mojo out there too. And people, I mean, workmen, 3 that I can think of, just said they would never go back. And I actually told my boss, I said, you know, if there's anything else that you want done to that house, you need to get somebody else to do it, because I will not go back to that house. Well, as it turned out, I had to go back to the house. And it was a quickie. I forget what it was. Some little something. I think I had to drop something off. I forget exactly the details, but I had to go back to the house. And I literally went up there, and there was something like in the foyer I had to do. I really don't remember what it was. But I went in and did whatever I had to do, left the door open, and then walked out. And then I called him and I said, this is it. I will not go back in that house again. So there are houses like that. That one was not as evil as the one I lived in for a year. That was awful. Terrible house. It was evil. Evil does exist. I mean, you know, we live in a magnetic world. We're polarized. So you have to have balance. So for good, you have to have bad. For fun, you have to have work and responsibility. For youth, you have to have old. So that's my story. That's my campfire story. And my campfire is burning out. It is smoking so bad. Thanks for stopping by, listening to my story. I appreciate you guys so much. The Spirited Senior is over and out.